I want to say in a very short and clear way what I think about a few points. Number one, you cannot exaggerate in the way that you describe the danger of Iran having an atomic bomb. As simple as that. And you should not consider the danger as of that one day they might drop the bomb on Israel or on any other country. The fact that Iran will have, or even right now, when Iran is in a process, so far away in a process of having soon, and it doesn't matter if this is 2 years, 1 year, 5 years, or 6 years, it has a very strong impact and a very negative input on Israel, on the region, on America, and on the entire world. I have no doubt about it, and many was discussed before in the panel. I do believe that this is possible to stop the program. And one very important point was already mentioned by Mahdi Kalaji, and he pointed out the tension between the ideology of the revolution, which is pure radical Islamic, and its goal is to collect and consolidate and to put together all the Islamic countries. And this is the highest priority comparing to the national interests. But he was saying, no, there are more than 1 or 2 indications that these regimes sometimes make a judgment and they consider the cost and benefits and the priority between the pure goal of the revolution and the Iranian national interests. And I can give you a few examples very shortly. Back in the 90s, when the Russians suppressed in a very aggressive way Chechnya, you never heard anything from the Iranians to support the Chechens, because this was the interest of the state of Iran. There was a confrontation between Armenia and Azerbaijan in 1998. Azerbaijan is 95% Muslims, Shiites. They never supported Azerbaijan. One of the reasons was the number of Azaris, which are claimed for some sort of independence in Iran. So the interest of the nation of Iran was above the interest of the goal or the goals of the revolution. Kosovo, just lately, was the same. And there is even more than that. And I think I repeat some of my colleague was saying before, but Rafsanjani back in 1988 quoted Khomeini saying that for the best interest of Iran, they should quit the war between Iran and Iraq. And later, in 2002, there was a case when Rafsanjani also addressed in one of the public occasions, and he was saying, and he was describing the option that one day Iran will drop an atomic bomb on Israel, and he was mentioning that it can be very effective on one way, but the results might be even much, much, much worse, vice versa, which means against Iran. The Iranians are very much affected by the Europeans, and I believe that the very efficient sanctions by the Europeans, and again, this all was discussed before, can be very, very effective. There are cases that we can count as a success. It's obvious that the Iraqi case, we stopped the program. But not only Saddam Hussein in Iraq, also we succeeded, when I say we, I mean the Americans, succeeded to stop nuclear program in Libya. But in all these cases, it was always been a combination of diplomacy together with military, at least an action, if not, at least an option, if not an action. So my message to you is never diplomacy is effective without a military option, and many times without a military action. And I would say most of the time, at least in the modern diplomacy today, and we experience these every day between Israel and the Palestinians, military action by itself, which is separate from diplomacy, does not work as well. So the name of the game is how to combine smartly between military option, military action, and diplomacy to achieve the goal. Now, what everybody has in mind, naturally, when they think about the military option, they think about the case of Iraq back in 1981. And I believe that most of us understand today that this is not the case. This was a single target, but not only that, this is obvious, but also the conditions were that everything could be pre-planned, exercised, trained. And even, we were just about to take off 2 or 3 times before we have made the actual attack, and it was never leaked to nowhere. This is not the case today. Every military action in Iran will be revealed and will be published the sooner it starts. And maybe we have to take it as an advantage and to make it published, because this is part of the diplomacy. The preparation for the attack is part of the diplomacy. The coordination between the partners, and the major partners are Israel and the United States, and I think that all of us can help to make the decision maker to understand they should not be afraid of exposing the coordination between Israel and the United States regarding the military action in Iran. You know that I would not exaggerate if I say that in Washington they knew about the attack in Iraq only after it actually happened. This is not the case today. The Iraqis were in the middle of a war against Iran, and they were busy and focusing on the Eastern Front. This is not the case today. The Iranians are much more relieved. They are much more powerful. They are much more advanced. They are much more independent today than the Iraqis were back in 1981. All right. So having said that we have to look for the right combination and the right balance and the right sequences between military and diplomacy, let's try to focus a little bit on the military aspect of this plan. First of all, you have to ask yourself, what is the goal? And the goal, which is different from what happened in Iraq, that in that case, it was just to destroy the facility, because this was only one spot. In this case, you should not count on destroying the entire facilities of the nuclear, all the nuclear facilities in Iraq. This is impossible. This is too ambitious. It can be done in one way when I describe the scenarios that I have in mind. But when you set the goal, you don't have to think about how am I going to destroy it and then to delay or to stop the plan, but how am I going to neutralize the will of the leadership to continue the plan, which is different even if you speak only on military. Then the first thing that you have to do is to look around and ask yourself if you are equipped with the right equipment to execute the mission. So I can tell you that the Israelis, we in Israel, in the Air Force, we have started to think about it back in 1991. And we had to make a decision how to use $2.5 billion to buy new airplanes, and we had two options, two choices. One was to buy 55 F-16s, and believe me, the Israeli Air Force is very lack of airplanes, of fighters. And the other option was to buy only 25 F-15s for the same amount of money that we had at that time. We have made a very tough decision. We bought the F-15I for the same amount of money. We cut short the number of fleet for many years, but this is just to make sure that we have the right equipment that can reach Tehran. And this was the F-15I. Later on, 8 years later, we started to plan the new buy, F-16s. The F-16s they usually have are different from what the Americans have. And we modified them by adding many things, and among other things was conformal tanks, which mean additional fuel to reach the distance of Iran. Israel, most of our wars were over the Golan Heights and Sinai. We never needed air refuelers, tankers. Now we have tankers. Most of our electronic warfare equipment were from the ground, because we had to deal with threat on the Golan Heights in Sinai. Now we put them up in the air because we have to fly as far as 2,500 kilometers. We gave a real push to the space program only because Iran. So we, the Israelis, and specifically we, the Air Force, have done the utmost on the account on other things in order to make sure that we do have at least the right answer, or a little piece of an answer, to the threat, which is the potential threat in the near future from Iran. And why is it so important? We never thought that we can do it unilaterally, only by ourselves. But the fact that the country has a potential threat from some spot on the globe, you need to have some amount of power that you can retaliate. That's first. Secondly, even if you understand that it is impossible to do the mission without cooperation with other countries, such as the United States, but to be a partner when you can do the same. Like if there is a combination of strike forces of American and Israelis, it is different. It puts you in a different level, and you look at the same level, eye level, with the Americans when you speak to them, and you can be part of the operation. If you just try to cooperate, and all you can do is maybe to prepare the shelters and to observe, the missiles that probably, or not probably, for sure, will come to Israel, this doesn't mean and equal participation. Equal participation meaning that you can participate in the strike. And this was the goal in the very first place when we started back in the early 90s. So F-15 is one, F-16 is second. Air refuelers, tankers, aerial picture, like what you all know, AWACS. We don't have AWACS, but we do have some alternatives to AWACS, which mean that we can control our forces as far as 15 to 2,500 kilometers. All these are examples when I say, first of all, you have to be equipped, and it takes 10 to 15 years to prepare this. And every time when I hear people say, well, you know, this is not a problem, they're going to have it not today, they're going to have it in 2 years from now. 2 years is nothing. Just the training, just the exercise that the Air Force need to do sometimes might take a year. And sometimes if this is all prepared and all ready, we have prepared to Iraq more than 4 years before we executed the strike. And it was delayed a few times. And sometime you miss 8 months because of weather, and another 10 months because of election in the United States, and then another 10 months before elections because of elections in Israel, and then another 10 months because something is happening in Europe, and so, and then 2 years have gone. Everything is ready. Pilots are ready, bombs are ready, airplanes are ready. You have enough intelligence information. Everything is ready. 2 years. It is difficult to the public to understand because one day you wake up and you hear that it happened, but you don't know how many times it did not happen. You don't know for how many years. I'm not saying that we have done it, but Murnia was assassinated in Damascus. But no matter who had done it, I can assure you that this was on the table at least for 3 to 4 or 5 years before you reach the point when you are completely prepared and you have a complete condition to make it with almost no risk. So 2 to 3 years to say that 2 years, 3 years, 5 years from now, we can wait. It has no meaning. Now, well, let's say that you have everything. You have some sort of coordination, you have the equipment, you need to have intelligence. Well, it's difficult to cover Iran. This is a big country. For them to hide part of their facilities is very easy, especially when the most crucial part of this infrastructure is under the ground. And you know, we had some underground targets in Lebanon. You see the entrance to the cave. And if you bomb, you know, the gate, it's actually nothing. You have to know where is the real target inside. Sometimes it goes to the right, sometimes to the left, sometimes straight ahead. So once they are under the ground, it's difficult to know where the target is because, you know, they can dig for 50, 100, maybe kilometer, 2 kilometers, and then the real target is somewhere away from where you're looking for. So this is tough. I must say, and this is something else, that we all can do something in order to encourage the two communities, the Israelis, the Europeans, and the Americans, to cooperate and to focus on Iran so we can fill the puzzle and know every piece of information before we go out there and do anything. Then the distance. Well, this is not just the 2,000 kilometers from Israel or 2,500 kilometers. The fact that you have to cross other countries make it more complicated. By the way, if someone think about Israel alone, the fact that you cross other countries, meaning that you coordinate and cooperate with other countries. Let me tell you about a very small detail, professional detail. Distance is not the only parameter. The real parameter is if you can reach this distance in low altitude, then you're in a good shape. But if the only way to reach this distance in a high altitude, then it's a different ballgame because everybody sees you. And you are exposed to many dangers, many unexpected events on the way in and on the way back. The strike in Iraq was all the way at the altitude which was no higher than 50 to 100 feet. We could see the eyes of the truck drivers going through, on the roads of Saudi Arabia, and nobody could see us. We knew that the AWACS was not there at that time. If the AWACS is not there looking at you, look down, then the regular radar on the ground cannot see you. But if you have to climb to 35,000 feet, then you are exposed to everyone in the region. You need to make sure that you have the right bomb, the right ammunition. Let me tell you that the centrifuges are as deep as, I would say, between 25 to 40 feet under the ground, in huge holes, which mean that even if you can penetrate, it would not be enough if you penetrate one spot, because you're not going to destroy the entire target. You have to drop maybe 50 in order to cover the entire hole under the ground. Let's say that you know exactly where it is, and you know the depth, and you can penetrate. You can even use more than one bomb to drill into the target. But it dictates the number of bombs, which mean the number of airplanes, which mean the length of the strike, which mean which make it so and so and more and more and more complicated. And then somebody already mentioned that you have to make sure that if you do it, you succeed, which means that you need redundancy, that you have to be prepared to go again and again until you accomplish the mission. And if you don't, you are in a situation which will be much, much worse than before. You cannot afford to have a failure, because once you do it, it is terrible. You have a wonderful example. Nasrallah in Lebanon. His goal last war was to survive. No more than that. Cause some damage in Israel, make 1 million people to get into shelters, not very many casualties. But after the war, he could sneak out the hole and say, I survived, meaning I'm the winner. Can you imagine a case when Ahmadinejad, after a strike, come out of his cave and he says, I survived, meaning I'm the winner. No matter if you delayed the program a few years, but the motivation and the inspiration that they will have afterwards will be much bigger than before. So you have to take it in account. And obviously, this is also mentioned in the panel, there is a risk of escalation. I'm not afraid of World War III, but I do afraid of escalation, especially to we Israelis, because we are the target. So you do have to consider escalation. You have to prepare yourself for escalation. So, well, very briefly, these are the checklist before you sit down and think and plan, and there are, of course, many other parameters, but let's say that this is what you have. This is the way of thinking before you sit down and make a plan. Now let's see what are the options. Maybe you count all the difficulties and all the risks, and you say, well, it's better to stick where we are today and to continue to do the most we can which means forget about this option, let's continue with diplomacy. One option. Option number two, well, we are not going to take any risk of failure. We want to destroy most of the target. We want to make sure that we go again and again, maybe 3, 4, 5 times more than needed in order to make sure that we have destroyed everything. If I just count the number of targets, which is if you multiply the target with the number of holes that you need to drill in each target, altogether it might reach between 60, 70 to 100. If you multiply the number of bombs and airplanes, if you look around, this is a real war. So option number two, which is a total strike, let's call it, this is a war against Iran. But there is also an option number three. Like everything, we used to say in Israel that in the military, you always have 3 choices, or 3 elements, or 3 parameters, everything 3. So here, in this case, we also have 3. And the third one is, if I may, I should bring you back to the point that I made in the first place, that this is some sort of combination between diplomacy and strike, diplomacy and military action. Now everything looks a bit different. You narrow the number of the target. You pick maybe 2, 3, or 4, which is most important. There is one, by the way, that where they transform the uranium from solid material into gas before they bring them to the centrifuge. This is a very crucial point. There is a place where they have this enrichment reactor. Maybe this is another spot. And also there is a place where they prepare the heavy water. They produce the heavy water. Maybe this might be the third target. I'm giving these 3 just as an example. Now we have 3 targets. And now let's add to these 3 targets something that might hurt the Iranian regime. How do you hurt the Iranian regime? You strike other targets which are likely to have more, I would say, easier to strike, like oil, electricity, or other national assets. And then the third family of targets might be a regime target. Some headquarters, some intelligence center, some other things. Then you have a very reasonable list of targets. Each of them, if you succeeded, is very effective. When you do the preparation, when you know that it's going to be open to the public somehow, then you do the right leaks and the right statements and the right explanations and the right, briefing to the press, meaning we are not intend to destroy everything. By doing so, actually, you immunite yourself from afterwards him to say, since you have not destroyed everything, I'm the winner, because you did not intend to do it in the first place. But then if you need some kick to the Europeans to participate in the sanctions, not in the military attack, but to really participate in sanctions, economic sanction and other sanctions against the Iranians from now on, they say, well, we do not want this thing to escalate into an apocalyptic situation. It's better us to join the sanctions in a very effective way rather than waiting to the time that we count only on military, which means it is a real war breakout in the Middle East. So between everything and nothing, there is something in between. This something in between is in the scale that, at least theoretically, Israel can do. But as I say, if you look at the case, at the entire case, and you assess the entire element of this case, then you understand that there is no case where one country, and especially Israel, can and should do it by itself. But the meaning of Israel is capable to do this has something else. And what Israel has, actually, it changed the situation that you can cooperate with the Americans, but not necessarily the American would lead the operation. This should be and might be, it can be, a fully coordination and partnership in the operation, but it can be led by the Israelis. So we should never think about this problem, this threat, as a threat only against Israel, not even against the Americans. This is a problem to the entire world. We should never think that one power, one air force, one country, one military forces can do or should do it by itself. It needs to be some sort of coalition. It can be led by the Israelis. It can be done, and I believe somehow it should be done before it will be too late. Thank you very much.
Eitan, that was excellent. Your heart can stop beating so fast because you belong in the next video. Let me, if I can, ask you a couple of questions and then turn the floor over to my colleagues in the audience. You gave a fascinating account of the development of Israeli thinking and of Israeli planning for the eventual possibility of dealing with Iran.
I did not say that this is the Israeli planning. No, I said this is how it should be planned. Okay, go ahead.
You made a comment earlier on. You can join me over here if you'd like, or the water, whichever you prefer. You made a comment earlier on that from the very beginning, I want to get your words exactly. The goal from the early 1990s was not to do it by ourselves, but to have real cooperation with another country, with our ally, the United States. Yeah. And then you ended up by saying that Israel could do it, could do a certain option, theoretically, but that, of course, it's very strong preference. It always has to proceed on the basis of acting with another party, perhaps.
I also want to be precise, to do the limited strike, which is the third option, right? This is not the same case that it used to be in Iraq, that you go in, and when you go back, no more facilities. This is not the case. But it can be a strike which will be really effective.
So tell me, if you will, just theoretically, how somebody in your position or in your successor's position would consider and take account of potential American role reaction, because it seems to me that it's a very different type of operation if the Americans are full partners or if the Americans are reluctant partners or not partners at all. It's not so easy to plan for all these different options.
Well, this is the partnership that I have in mind is an active partnership. You want me to give you an example?
Sure.
We need between 1 to 3 carriers in the Gulf. We need to have rescue forces somewhere near to the border, near to the coast, for just in case. We need to have an approval from other countries, and in order to get it, just for them, to close their eyes that we crossed their country, we need support from the United States. By the way, one of the most important assets as an outcome of the war in Iran is the fact that the Americans are controlling the space of the state of Iraq. Can you imagine that we had to plan this kind of strike when Iraq is in the hands of Saddam Hussein? So we have done, let's say, 1/3 of the way already. So let's accomplish.
I'll take the we being quite a figurative, general we. How do you evaluate what a typical Israeli is not there's no such thing, but is it your sense that most Israelis believe that taking preventive action, taking military action, at the end of the day is something that is going to have to happen to solve this problem?
To be honest, the answer is no. They have it back in their dream. They would love to wake up one day in the morning and to hear that it was done. They would love. But they do have some understanding how difficult and complicated it is. You know, this is the wisdom of the public, you can call it. You don't have to be professional. They feel it. So if you're asking me if they would love to have it done, the answer is yes. This is their dream. If you're asking me if they would have pushed our government to do that, the answer is no. And besides, you know, for every military action and for every resilience move, in general, unless you have a real leadership, in general, there is a laziness among the people. They don't want, they would love to continue, have a good time on the beach of Tel Aviv. You know, this is, and I can understand them. So this is not on the headline every day. And you know what? This is an interesting question, because let's go to another case, which is the same case, but in much smaller scale. Gaza and the rockets from Gaza. Even there, most people would love to be after the invasion into Gaza. Just very small group of people, mainly the citizens of Sderot, they would do anything to push on a daily basis the government to do that. Well, the lesson learned from this, or the outcome, is actually that it is mostly dependent on the leadership and not on the people. If the leadership understands it, and the leadership know how to lead the people, to form the coalition, to create an understanding, to create the case against the Iranians, this is all needs to be done by the leadership. And you know what? Today they use PR, and they use advertisement companies, and they use many means that in the past you never even dare to think about. Today, yes. Your people are watching TV all the day. They are on the internet. These are the facilities. These are the mechanisms that you have and you need and you have and you can. I'm not saying that this is easy, that you can to lead the people to understand that this is what should be done.
You raised a very important point early on about how long the planning process is, and about how so many other factors can postpone and interrupt the planning process. Absolutely. Let me ask, based on your experience, to what extent does progress or impasse in the peace process impact a strategic issue like addressing the Iranian problem?
Well, it does. It does. Now you really pushed the subject into a corner. It does. Well, first of all, this is the attention that the leadership, as well as the military, as well as the other human and other assets that you have, the attention that they have to pay for the peace process. If it does have an impact on the public opinion, I would say again, with the right leadership and the right tactic, you can handle them both. People understand that you do peace with the good guys and you have to fight against the bad guys. And they understand that. And you can explain this to the people. So I would say, although I made it very clear that this is the highest top concern, that we must have Iran having a nuclear weapon, but I would say that it should not be on the account. I would not stop or block the peace process if I have the opportunity because of that. We can do them both. First of all, if this is a single strike, then there is no problem at all. But as I described, you should consider that it might be a wider one, and maybe we'll go for a few days, maybe a few weeks. If you succeeded, then it's a bingo. You win the 2-track. If you failed, maybe you go back to the peace process. At least I get this one.
Let me turn the floor over to you in the audience. If you have questions, if you could raise your hands, and people will come to you with microphones. First on the left over there, then Bud over here, and Shimon, and this gentleman right here. Yes, please. Right there, right in front of you.
I wonder if you'd respond to a sensitive issue. Did the Israeli government already initiate option 3 when they bombed the suspect Syrian site?
You answer that.
No. He wants to know about the Syrian September 6th.
If it was what?
Have you already begun option 3 by your actions on September 6th?
Oh, that was a
You have to take the microphone.
I don't know. It's up to you to decide. I really don't know.
Yes, Bud. Right in the middle, please. On your left, Bud, there's a microphone. And can you give the microphone to this other gentleman here so we're all ready?
Thank you.
Right there.
General, it was an interesting dissertation on how you might achieve a military option. My question is this. You mentioned that you can't do this unilaterally anymore. You need other people. How difficult is it to maintain the secrecy of an operation for surprise when you have to coordinate with not only another military organization, but crossing borders, etc.? You also have the problem of, in the U.S. military, we have both the European command that you're involved with and the Central Command, which is involved with the Iranian situation.
The answer is that you cannot. But I would take the advantage of it, which means that if I can keep secretly the part which is important to keep it secret, but I leak or I live with the fact that other parameters are leaked for me, this is part of the operation. I'm telling you. For me, if the 2 carriers were there today, and for me, if there is an exercise in the Mediterranean between us and the US Navy, which is clear to everybody, this is part of the operation. Maybe you will never have to go there. This is what I hope. You will never have to go there. So you can prevent it, use it.
Yes, please. And can the other mic come up to Shimon here in the front?
I'm curious as to, there's a number of precipitous events that could occur whereby it would occasion a retaliation. What would you consider to be the most likely that would lead Israel, the United States, the rest of the world to take out the Iranian threat?
I'm not sure I understood that.
You know, I think that there's just a number of events that could happen that would necessitate a retaliation. What would you consider to be the most likely to occur in the near future?
I mean, that would
Push the button and launch missiles directly to Tel Aviv. As simple as that. They do have some problem, by the way, that, you know, these are not terminal guided type of missiles, which mean that they are not accurate. In the what we call CP, which is the diameter of 50% of the rockets falling in, this is the parameter how you measure the accuracy of this weapon. It is dependent on the distance. And in such distance, it can be fairly big. And it can get as close as to Jerusalem. And I think they would never dare to hit Jerusalem. But there are other parts of the country, and I would not count on that. But if you ask, you know, there are some things, and here I speak not as an academic, I speak as a military or as a leader. There are some things that you have to consider that they're going to happen, even if they're not going to happen. So if you're asking me, the minute after they see us on the radar, I have to be ready for a barrage of ballistic missiles on Israel.
Shimon, and can someone bring the microphone to Howard Berkowitz, a couple of rows behind Shimon?
Option number 2, the military option. Some people are opponent of it because of the consequences. It has advantages, disadvantages, mainly an intensified terrorist activity, including the United States, and a disruption in the supply of oil. The whole world will be up in arms, standing in line. Still, it seems that there's a way to have the cake and eat it. While bombarding some of the facilities, also to eliminate the leadership of this country. What's your opinion?
Well, you know, part of the few years of the preparation is the selection of the target, and I would prefer to leave it for the very last moment and not to say anything about this right now. But one of the parameters that you consider when you make the selection of the target is the impact, the information, the chances, and the matching between your ammunition and the target, and also the consequences. I do believe, as you say, that when I come to make the plan, and especially if I come to a point where I have to make the last decision and the last selection of the target, I would also consider the parameter of the consequences and the retaliations. I do, and you can do something about it.
Howard?
General, you gave a very thorough and detailed and excellent presentation on this issue. Over the years, I've heard you give similar dissertations and answers on equally difficult problems. As you know, over the years, many of Israelis' most well-respected politicians have come from the military. And I'm just curious whether you've given any thought to getting involved in political inside Israel.
This is part of the conference. My friend Howard, we do know each other for a few years. Well, I don't know. I don't know, maybe here in America.
Gentleman in the far back in the center there, please. And then if the mic right over there, Crystal, right in front of you. The gentleman right in front of you.
In the event that U.S. is unwilling to participate and coordinate a military operation with Israel, would Israel undertake a unilateral action?
If the United States refuses, would Israel still go ahead with it?
You know, one of the purposes of my speech is to get rid of the way of thinking that a unilateral type of strike by any country make any sense, and this is not at all an option. And it actually covers two things. First of all, this is true, but also there is something else that I feel here in America. Because people think that if America don't do it, then maybe the Israelis will take responsibility and do it. Then if there is room for this kind of thinking, it removes the responsibility from the shoulders of the American leadership, which I think it's bad. We all need to understand, and to make everybody understand, and this is not an indication of weaknesses, you know, that America always went to a war and they formed a coalition before they went to a war, most of the time. For the Israelis, after the Holocaust, you know, for the Jews, every time when you say, well, I go to do that, but I have to form first coordination with another forces, then this is like an indication that you're not of a weakness, that you're not strong enough. I say no. In the modern life and in the modern battlefield, that you fight as far as such a distances, like it always been between superpowers. Superpowers always had allies and always made plans for wars or for any security operations coordinated with allies. So stick to this kind of thinking, and it will be transmitted into every leadership, and this is how it should be done.